On today's show, it's an off-season check-in with the radio play-by-play voice of the Florida Panthers, Doug Plagens. We talk about him participating in the Florida Panthers Summer Reading Tour, thoughts on the off-season, and because it's the summer, we discuss our summer hobbies.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, August 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez. You can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Cats fans, this is a really exciting episode that I'm very thankful to have had this conversation and very excited for all of you to listen to, especially because Doug is a friend of the show and he is my friend personally. We talk a lot, even off camera, and very thankful that he was able to come on every single round throughout the Panthers Stanley Cup run. And this won't be the last time that Doug Plagens will be on the show, but on today's show, it is an off-season check-in edition with Doug Plagens and how he thinks about the Florida Panthers. And we are going to get into our summer hobbies since we are in the dog days of summer. So now let's get to that conversation between myself and the play-by-play voice of the Florida Panthers, Doug Plagens. And as promised, we have today's special guest here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. He was here throughout every series throughout the Florida Panthers Stanley Cup final run. And now it is going to be a check-in edition of the show, but an off-season edition. We have the play-by-play voice of the Florida Panthers through the Florida Panthers radio network, Doug Plagens. Doug, welcome back to the show.
Thanks as always for having me, Armando. Always great to jump on the show, and I hope the summer's been treating you well.
It's been treating me well. It's been a great opportunity to travel on my end, that's for sure. And we'll get more of definitely the summer hobbies in the latter part of the show. But what I want to get one thing right off the bat is because I saw some of the Twitter and Instagram posts of you participating in the Florida Panthers Summer Reading Tour just recently over the weekend. Talk to us a little bit about where it was, how you felt reading to the kids, what and of course what book you read to the crowd over during the Florida Panthers Summer Reading Tour.
Well, I actually read two this time, and it's always a lot of fun to participate in the Panthers Summer Reading Tour. It's one of the great community initiatives we have and a great community partnership with the Broward County Libraries. So every summer, we're always out and about, and there are guest readers from the Panthers, players and personalities, going out and doing the reading. And this year, I think we had 5 different stops. At the one in Pembroke Pines a couple of weeks back, Dmitry Kulikov read to the kids at that one, and Ryan Lomberg was the guest reader very early in the program. I think it might have been the first or second one. It might have even been the first one of this summer at the one in Sunrise, again, maybe a month or so ago. So it was great to catch up with him. Great to see the kids get to get out and meet members of the Panthers. And it's always fun. I always do at least 1 or 2 of them every single year. It's something we've been doing for at least 5 years or so by now. And it's just great to get out in the community. Great to see the kids, see all the buzz and the support of the Panthers, and be able to talk hockey with some of the kids in the area. And I read a couple of hockey themed books. That's what we always do. There are always hockey themed children's books, but there's one about a Zamboni called I'm Cool. And I've read that one, I think, just about every time that I've done it. So that's kind of playing the hits. but I read one that I'd never read before. It was called Good Night Hockey, and it had to do actually with a young kid who had to go to bed before the game was over, and he listened to the radio broadcast, in his room quietly on his dad's little portable radio. So that was pretty cool. And again, it's just always something that we enjoy getting out and doing every summer, and it's just it's great to do all the different community initiatives that we have.
Yeah, and if the kids are putting themselves in the position of the character in Good Night Hockey, I'm sure the voice that they're hearing is Doug Plagens from the Florida Panthers radio network, 560 WQAM, and also maybe that's what they're picturing as they're about to go to bed the day before the game, whether they're going to the Ice Den, Pines Ice Arena, Kendall Ice Arena, you name it, and all. But great to see that you and along with other Florida Panthers personalities out there and just engaging. Even our friend David Dwork, we had his son at one of the stops, so it's a good opportunity to bring even the people of the media, their children, to these events as well.
Yeah, Bill Lindsay read at one this year. He's always out at least one or two of them every year too. I know he always enjoys it, and he's always so great with the kids doing the Learn to Play programs as well. Billy's out at tons of those. But yeah, I can't say enough about it. Just a great program.
No doubt. So let's get to the topics that that people come here definitely to listen to, and that is, of course, the team on the ice, the Florida Panthers. Last time we spoke, we were discussing in betweens games 2 and 5 when the Panthers were back at home, discussing our opinions on where the Panthers were at that time. But now a lot has happened since the Florida Panthers. It's funny because they were still ranked above tops in the NHL as far as contract efficiency, their ability to continuously reset for the next season. But I want to get you, the person who's in the building and of course works for the team as well, about how you feel about how the Panthers structured their offseason.
Well, I think they did a great job. And, going into this offseason, what they appeared to do was identify areas where they could shore up the depth. And that's exactly what they've done. And you touched on it, Armando. This team and Bill Zito, his hockey operations staff, the pro scouting department, the job that they've done over these last few seasons of whether it was identifying a player maybe that was ready for an increased responsibility, somebody like Carter Verhaeghe, who went from kind of a depth role, not getting a ton of minutes in Tampa to come to the Panthers and now evolving into a 40-goal scorer, which we've seen, or a guy who, like Gus Forsling, somebody who was able to come in and had some untapped potential, and the Panthers were able to tap into that, bring the best out of him. The Panthers, and like I said, Bill Zito and his staff have done a great job of either identifying guys who could benefit and further evolve, getting more responsibility, more minutes, or they've been able to find guys that would just thrive being put in this kind of system. I think they've done a great job of identifying guys that can come in here and make an impact and further develop their game. And this year they did a lot of the same things. And you look at some of the guys that they brought in. Again, this was a free agent season where the Panthers went, shopping for depth. They really shored up the defensive depth. They go, 8, maybe more deep, and you're going to need that over the course of a season, bringing in a guy like Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And there's another example, a guy coming out of Vancouver. This is a guy who can still provide big minutes, who can still play a big offensive role. And things didn't work out in Vancouver, signs a 1-year deal here. The Panthers at the same time, obviously with some uncertainty, maybe some injuries on the blue line. We'll wait and see once training camp and everything comes along to get a better idea of how that's going to go. But if you need somebody who could step in and play 24 minutes a night, run a power play unit, for example, depending on what some of those other injuries on the Panthers look like, Oliver Ekman-Larsson's your guy. So it helps the Panthers in that regard because he can handle the responsibility. It helps Oliver Ekman-Larsson because he's coming in on a 1-year deal with a ton of runway left still on his career. Even though it feels like he's been around a long time, he's still got a lot of years left in this sport. And if he comes in and has a monster year, it could win him another big contract as well at some point. So that's a signing that works well for both parties. And we had a chance to talk to Oliver on our podcast, Territory Talk, and he just wants to come in and win. He wants to be a part of this Panthers team. He saw what they accomplished last year, and that's extremely attractive to him. We talked to Mike Riley, another veteran defenseman the Panthers brought in. He's going to be able to bring some depth as well, and he can play a good two-way game, and he's a veteran guy, knows his way around the rink. Same thing about Dmitry Kulikov, in a little different situation there because he's been a Panther before. His last season with the Panthers was 15-16, so it's been a while, but he feels right at home coming back. This is the organization that drafted him, years ago. So he's excited to be back. The Panthers have been able to shore up that defensive depth with some veteran guys. They've got some guys coming as well. But up front, too, bringing in a guy like Evan Rodriguez. And the thing that makes him attractive, especially, he's played for good coaches. He's played for Mike Sullivan. He's played for Jared Bednar. He's played on good teams. He's played on playoff teams. And the other thing with Evan Rodriguez, his big breakout year came a couple of years ago where he played a big chunk of the year in Pittsburgh on a line with Sidney Crosby. He knows how to play with elite players. He plays a responsible two-way game. He's got a great one-timer, could contribute on one of the power play units, but he also knows how to play with elite guys. Wouldn't be surprised if maybe he gets a crack playing a wing with Barkov. Maybe that's something that happens. And if, he's shown the ability to play with elite guys before, and no reason to think that he couldn't do it again. You go down the list, a forward like Kevin Stenlund, big centerman coming in. Bill Zito knows him well from their time in Columbus. Certainly reason to be excited about that. And, Stephen Lawrence coming in, veteran guy, again, knows his way around the rink. The Panthers did a good job shoring up the depth. Alex Stolarz, goaltender, wherever he slots in, whatever the Panthers goaltending looks like come opening night, of course, he's a guy that, kind of fits that Alex Lyon type of role that we saw last year. Obviously, Alex Lyon has moved on to Detroit, but with Stolarz, backed up John Gibson, had stretches where he didn't play a ton in Anaheim, but had really nice numbers. When you crunch them all together, his numbers were really good over the last few years in a backup role. So a veteran guy who knows how to take care of himself. If he goes, a couple of weeks where he's the backup and he's not seeing a ton of game action, you don't have to worry about him getting stale. He's a pro. He knows how to take care of himself. And when he's been called upon in his career, he's been able to really post some good numbers, and he's a big guy too. So again, you look at what Bill Zito did, and I know I didn't touch on every name on the list, but you look at what Bill Zito did over the course of this offseason, and around the edges, around the depth spots, the Panthers look like they're ready to continue and build off what they did last year.
Yeah, and it's just consistently about making it, and at least going extend, even if it's not a round one win, the fact that they're still battling and grinding throughout it, and that sends a message to players who are upcoming free agents. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is a team that I want to be a part of. And you touched on the whole Stolarz thing, backing up Gibson about Sergei Bobrovsky. You said even on your podcast and even on this podcast that Sergei Bobrovsky has played his best when he's started consistently over a stretch of time, when he's actually in the groove of a season as well, and that's really helpful. You talk about Mike Riley, who only played 10 games with the Bruins, is going to get probably more than that with the Panthers, depending on the injury situation with Ekblad and Montour as well. But I do want to,
and I wanted to Nico Mikkola is another guy. I didn't even mention him, but coming in 3-year deal from the Rangers, he's one of those guys that at the end of a game, the numbers may not show up on the box score always, but he impacts the hockey game. And he is going to be somebody who could, maybe he slots into that Mark Stahl spot paired with Brandon Montour, and, provides that stable presence the way that Brandon and Mark, because Mark was that stay-at-home, responsible defensive guy that was able to really help Brandon thrive last year. Maybe that's where Nico steps in a 3-year deal. He's a guy that Bill Zito envisions to be, a part of the core moving forward, being here on a 3-year contract like that. So that's going to be a guy that's going to contribute in a big way. And I think fans are really going to enjoy watching him play.
Yeah. And a contract that's very team friendly as well for the team, and allows Montour to do his thing when he does come back for sure. We're going to pause this conversation with the radio play-by-play voice of the Florida Panthers, Doug Plagens, to tell you all about our sponsor, AG1. And I started taking AG1 because even though I'm from South Florida and I love my coladas, cortaditos, café con leche, you name it, sometimes I need a little bit of a break from it. And that's where AG1 comes into play. And it's something that I drink literally every day. It's a natural supplement that supports my whole body health. And I do it before my workout, sometimes even to start my day. And it makes me feel great after drinking AG1. If a comprehensive solution is what you need for your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and get 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Check it out. If we're taking the Florida Panthers lens off for a little bit, and we're talking about where to put our finger on every team, and then you go to the Panthers, this is one of the hardest teams to predict what they could possibly do in the upcoming season, as far as whether they're going to jump right out the gate because they have a whole bunch of guys who have a whole bunch of to prove, whether it's a slow start once again because of familiarity or lack thereof with some of these guys. But I could also possibly see a situation where, even though with Paul Maurice being in his second year with the team, now the fact that there's a foundation there, and even if they're not as healthy as they are, I think there could be a possibility that the Florida Panthers could start off even better than what they were last season, because you have that foundation in place. Matthew Tkachuk, he spoke about that he's feeling close to 100% just recently. He's likely gonna have a full training camp as well. So where do you see as far as the Panthers and starting out in like October, November, December?
I think what you mentioned there with Paul Maurice going into his second year, and of course coming off a trip to the Stanley Cup final, the guys are confident. They saw the results last year. They saw the way things clicked, late last season. So I think you're going to see a really confident team coming out of the gate. And this is, in my mind, no doubt one of the top tier teams, one of the playoff teams in the Eastern Conference, even with the potential for some key guys to, again, there are some timetables that we just don't know, and maybe we'll get some clarity come training camp in terms of the collective health of the group. But regardless of how that plays out, I think this team's got what it takes out of the gate to make noise in the Atlantic Division. Now, that's the other thing. You look at the Atlantic Division, I don't know that there's a tougher division in the National Hockey League, and a tougher division to really put your finger on as far as how you think things are going to play out, because in my mind, you still have the big four in the Atlantic that look like playoff teams in no particular order: the Panthers, the Lightning, Boston, Toronto. Boston, they did lose a lot. Patrice Bergeron retired. They're going to look different come next season. And, you wonder, have they, what kind of a mental bounce back will they have after that season they put together last year, only to have it come to a screeching halt in Game 7 of the first round? I still think they're a playoff team. You can't realistically say they're a 65 win team again, because nobody had ever won 65 games before. Yeah. So I just don't see them duplicating that. So because of that, the other teams in the Atlantic are probably going to pick up some points that were Boston's points last year. That being said, Tampa Bay retooled a bit. I still think with Andrei Vasilevsky and net in his prime that they're at least a playoff team in some capacity. Toronto looks pretty similar to what they were. They may have even tightened some things up a little bit. They look like they're going to be a 100-point team once again. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case. And I see the Panthers being a playoff team again. Now, the X factors here, Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit are all better. If somebody stumbles out of the gate, there might be some catch-up that has to be played, because I think that you're going to see Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit at minimum in the race and playing important games down the stretch. I don't think we're going to see the 4 teams in the Atlantic safe and sound in playoff spots with a month to go in the regular season. I think those teams at least are going to push. I think this might be a year you see 5 teams out of the Atlantic make the playoffs. I haven't really sat down and etched my predictions in stone just yet, but health, obviously, we'll see how health plays into it. Injuries can happen, things like that, but I see Buffalo and Ottawa both vying for a playoff spot. And as far as right now is concerned, I don't see Detroit as being that far behind those two. So you've got 7 out of the 8 teams in the Atlantic who probably go into this season with expectations that they're going to compete for a playoff spot. It's going to be an entertaining division, and you're not going to be able to take a night off. And like I said, Boston's probably not going to win 65 games again. So those teams like Buffalo, like Ottawa, like Detroit, they're going to take more of the points. It's going to be a heck of a race. I think you just have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure in Ottawa for sure on the coaching staff and GM with new ownership coming in. Of course, the health of Jacob Chikrin and Shabbat are definitely gonna be a factor there, and of course having Korpisalo as their new goalie in town. The Buffalo Sabres, they brought back a lot of the guys back. They even brought their captain, fourth liner Kyle Pozo back. But what's gonna be the goalie situation there with former Panther Devin Levi there? What's that gonna look like as well? And Detroit having Alex DeBrincat, bringing him into the mix, and with a good team-friendly deal as well. We spoke about the Panthers team-friendly deal, but for Alex DeBrincat and the Detroit Red Wings, a good deal for both sides as well. Stevie Y knowing how to wheel and deal these. And on the other side of the Metro, it got a little tougher with Erik Karlsson now being part of the Penguins. So that's another possibility there. With I think Carolina and New Jersey are in as far as the Metro. Rangers, I'm not so sure.
Prior to the Erik Karlsson deal, I would have said that your shoe-in playoff teams in the Metro, and again, we could go back and replay this in 6 months, and we could be all wrong about everything. But Carolina, New Jersey, and the Rangers look safe. And the Rangers, I know that there's been some retooling, things like that, but I do feel like those young guys at some point are going to take a next step. And I feel like with Igor Shesterkin, you're in it. You're always going to be in it with a guy like that. So I thought those would be your shoe-in playoff teams. Erik Karlsson to the Penguins. It's interesting. Kyle Dubas he was able to maneuver get some money off the salary cap that probably helps them a little bit too. And this is a team that when they brought back, and it was a different regime, but when they brought back Crosby and Malkin and Letang, they kind of decided they're going to go for it with that core for the next few years. And you bring in Erik Karlsson, and they're going really all in here for the next few years. And they were able to move some money off the books to maybe give them some flexibility, some room to figure some other things out. But that's going to be a really dangerous team. And the thing with the Pittsburgh Penguins, I know they were the team. They're the team. The Panthers got in on that last week of the season. The Penguins are the team that's been under the microscope for maybe missing an opportunity there at the end, because they had 2 games in the final week against Chicago and Columbus, and they weren't able to do anything with it. And there's no doubt that has haunted them, going into the offseason. If they get a healthy Tristan Jarry, who is at the top of his game, that now you throw Erik Karlsson into the mix, assuming it all gels. Mike Sullivan's done a really good job over his tenure getting pieces to fit when they've had injury bugs, when they've called guys up. His system just seems to he really seems to always have a knack for getting the pieces to fit in. Erik Karlsson is a very unique player, one of the most unique players that we've seen in the league in the last 10, 15 years. But I think a lot of it goes to Tristan Jarry. If they get good goaltending, because they went back and brought back Tristan Jarry, when he's been on top of his game, that's a guy that people have pointed to and said, you know what, if the NHL players went back to the Olympics, that might be Team Canada's goalie. The way when he's looked at the top of his game, if they get healthy, A game Tristan Jarry, that might be a playoff team in the Metro, which could make things even tougher on that cluster of teams in the Atlantic. So again, it's the Eastern Conference is a gauntlet. There's no doubt about it. No doubt. And it's tough to call. I mean, how often do you go into a season where it's tough to say who the favorite is in either division. You can make the case for 3 teams on each side winning a division.
Yes, for no doubt. And that definitely it makes it interesting, even though the Pittsburgh Penguins are a little bit on the older side. I just wonder how many games Igor starts for the New York Rangers with a guy in Jonathan Quick on the twilight of his career. So that's why I'm very iffy just about the amount of starts Igor Shesterkin will get, which makes it a little confusing there. We're going to take a break from our conversation with the radio play-by-play voice of the Florida Panthers, Doug Plagens. We are going to continue this conversation after this commercial break.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to take this opportunity to transition away from the hockey talk. We got our fill in as far as that, but I want to, with it being the summer and no moves expected, at least from the time of this recording around 2 p.m. on a Monday. This will be airing on a Tuesday. Just to talk a little bit about our summer activities that we like to do and that we have done over the years. The very first time that you joined the show was actually in the summer of 2021, going into the President's Trophy winning season for the Panthers, and we had our metal music segment where we spoke about like the bands that we've seen in our past. This weekend, Doug, I got the opportunity to see Disturbed and Breaking Benjamin this week as they were touring around Florida. And next month I will be seeing Avenged Sevenfold for the very first time in concert. I will be seeing them at the West Palm Beach Amphitheater. But are there any shows or what are any recent bands that Doug is on Doug Plagens' Spotify?
Well, I'm hoping to get out to one of those Avenged Sevenfold shows somewhere. That's to be determined. We'll see if schedule-wise I'm able to make it work. But I'm hoping to get out to one of those. I've seen them a handful of times over the years, and actually had a chance to see them with the Rev when he was still with us, a long time ago. One of the most brilliant musicians of recent history. So again, I've had a chance to see them a handful of times over the years, and they're always outstanding. So you will enjoy it. So I have no doubts about that. If you're going in with high expectations, keep those expectations high, because you're going to enjoy it. I haven't gotten out to a good metal show here in a while. I went to a punk festival at the end of June up in Columbus, so I saw a lot of my favorite bands there. NoFX headline both days. It's kind of their farewell run, which I'm not exactly sure when it's going to end, but they've said that it's going to. So I just figured I had the time, I had a chance to go, and I just booked the flight and went up to Columbus and went to that. But I saw a lot of bands that I really like: Mustard Plug, Less Than Jake, Descendants, Strung Out, just a lot of really cool bands there over the course of 2 days. And so that's the festival that I was able to get out to. And I did see Blink when they were at FLA Live Arena not too long ago. So I had a chance to see that. And I'm hoping I can get out and see Offspring and Sum 41 when they're on this run that they're on here coming up. So I'm hoping I get a chance to get to one of those dates as well. But that's kind of what I have as far as the music goes currently on the docket, and stuff that I've been able to see and that I want to get out and see at some point.
Yeah, it's funny. Blink-182, that was when they came over here. That was a time of a lot of busyness. It was like during D camp. We spoke all about with the prospect about how they heard it from their parents. I'm like, oh no. And I turned 30 in October, so I'm just like, oh no. I'm getting to that point in my life when it comes to Blink-182's popularity and then going down to other generations. Unfortunately, I was not at either of the shows in South Florida nor Tampa, but definitely want to catch them. And I caught them twice. We
we saw them in Toronto the night before Game 5, because we were close to the arena where we were staying, and they happened to be there that night. So me and our video producer Dave Courtney, who travels on the road with us with the Panthers, he and I just jumped online, bought a couple of tickets, and walked over and went because we were close. It was right there. We figured, why not? So I caught him in Toronto, and then I caught him here in Sunrise as well.
That's amazing. What amazing scheduling that came about for you.
Twice this season, once during the playoffs, then actually the first road trip of the season. The night before, we were in Boston. It was the first time the Panthers and Bruins played. So we're talking back in October. It was a Sunday night, and Smashing Pumpkins and Jane's Addiction played at TD Garden where the Bruins play. So happened to catch them catch a show that night as well. So that was.
I remember you took a picture from your seat, the exact location before morning skate, and where you sat. I remember. Yeah, I remember that. So just a lot of credit goes to the arena crews that do all these changeovers as well. And when I was doing a show after Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final, I was actually seeing the changeover as it was going on as I was recording my show. So got to see a little bit of the hard work that those people.
Yeah, don't ever take for granted the work of the arena changeover crews, especially in some of these places. You think about it.
Crypto.com specifically.
I would say the former Staples Center, now Crypto.com Arena, where they've got 2 NBA teams and an NHL team and concerts. And I believe they have the WNBA there. And right. I mean, they've got everything going on in that building. It's rare to have a dark night in that building where there's nothing going on. And I've been there before when we had an afternoon game against the Kings, and I'm sitting there doing my post-game show, and all of a sudden I looked up 15 minutes later, and it looks like we're there for a Clippers game. They get it changed over. I'm not kidding. They do it lightning quick, and the work that these crews do around the league, and especially on top of that, the crews that manage the ice in these multi-purpose facilities, it takes a lot, and it takes a lot of science, and it takes a lot of attention to detail to make sure that regardless of what playing surface you have down or what kind of event surface you have down, everything is meeting the expectations and the specifications. The arena changeover crews deserve a ton of credit.
No doubt. And I happened to go to the inside of the arena when they were taking the ice off after the locker room cleanout day. And I just wonder what the electric bill for the arena is during the summer when the ice isn't on there at FLA Live Arena versus during the season. Of course, you don't have to keep it at a certain temperature throughout the day as well to keep the ice where it is. So
it's not the $80 that I pay here in my apartment.
Yeah, so that's actually a very good electric bill for you, Doug. It's probably like maybe triple, quadruple.
Well, this time of the year, it's probably give or take. It's a little higher, but I'd say on average, that's where.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been hot lately. So yeah, I've had the AC working a little harder lately.
Yes, but once October comes, that'll be going right back down for you for sure. So, but definitely not at the rates that the arena in Broward County have to deal with for sure. But Doug, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Very thankful to have you once again here. Tell everybody where they can find you online.
Yeah, I'm always available online on Twitter, if we can still call it Twitter, at Doug Plagens. On Instagram, at Doug Plagens. You can find me there. All the different social channels like that. And then, of course, once the season starts, you can listen to every Panthers game. 560 WQAM is our flagship home. If you're in the Palm Beaches, 1230 The Gambler. If you're in the Florida Keys, 100.3 Thunder Country. If you have Sirius XM, channel 932 on your Sirius XM app. A lot of you may not even realize that if you have a Sirius XM subscription, you may not even realize that on the Sirius XM app, there is one channel. Every major league sports team has one. But channel 932 is always the Panthers game, and it's always our broadcast. And you can't get that on the car console. You can only get that's only on your app, but it is there. And if you're not sure, I know in the fall things get crowded. If there's a broadcast conflict, if we wind up on a different station down here in Miami-Dade and Broward County, the NHL app, it's always free to listen there. That takes all the guesswork out of it. You can always go to the NHL app and you can find us right there. There's that headphone icon and off you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug, and I hope to see you next time, my friend.
Thanks as always for having me. We'll talk to you soon.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steve Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Everydayers, we will be back here on Wednesday, and you know what that means. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the show, so make sure you come back here as Jacob Winans will be back on the show. So I'm Armando Velez with Doug Plagens, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.